Jan was walking down the busy sidewalk of the city, briefcase in one hand and coffee in the other. She was going to a meeting to settle the plans for construction of her company's new location. She looked down at her watch to make sure she was making good time. It was really just a habit, for Jan was always on time. It seemed to be automatically built into her to always plan things to fit down to the minute. See, Jan was the oldest of 3, and amongst her siblings she was always the one with the most responsibility. Their mother left them shortly after Jan's youngest sibling, her sister, was born. And with their father being the CEO of a large company, Jan was always put in the situation of looking after her brother and sister. Beyond that, her father would often teach her about his work, for as the eldest, it was hoped that she would take the responsibility of his company once he retired. She worked diligently and was hired to work for the company when she was 16. During college, she started her own business and now lives in the city working full-time to grow her company and helping her father at home and at work from day to day. Between school, family, and work, Jan's life ever since she could remember was busy. She looked at each day by the minute rather than the hour. But while that may seem like a lot for some, Jan never thought so. After all, it was her life, the only one she's ever known. Responsibility was in her blood, and she always had the strength to handle it. She continued walking down the sidewalk and stopped at the walk signal to cross the street when her phone rang. It was her sister, and she sounded frantic. Jan calmed her down, and she started telling Jan what had happened. Jan managed to keep her composure, as she always did, but she could not stop her eyes from showing the shock that she felt. Her father was in the hospital. He had had a cardiac arrest. Jan's sister explained that they said he would be okay, but he wouldn't be able to work for some time. Jan comforted her sister some more and said that she would call her back once she figured out what to do. The moment she hung up the phone, Jan's head was swarmed with thoughts. The walk signal turned green, and she walked across the street along with dozens of other people. Her father's company was at a pivotal time, and if he wasn't able to work, his company could very well go under. She could step in for him, but then what of her own company? Hers was at an important point as well. With the plans of relocation, they would need her to oversee the operations. And what of her sister? Her brother was away studying abroad, and her sister was still at home. She wouldn't be able to care for herself. Jan knew she would probably take over her father's business someday, but it was too soon. She hoped to have her own company in the maturity stage by then, so that she could pass it on to her younger siblings, who by then would be done with school, and Jan stopped walking and sighed. She needed to focus. She took a sip of her coffee, but almost immediately splurted it out, making the people around her jump in surprise and give her a dirty look. It was not coffee. Apparently, the cafe where she bought it from had mixed up her order and gave her hot chocolate instead. She hated hot chocolate, ever since she was a child. She looked for a trash can, but none were in sight. She sighed again and continued walking when she realized something and immediately stopped in her tracks again. She was not where she should have been. She looked at the street sign and realized she was supposed to turn right when she reached the walk signal, but she ended up walking straight across, and quite far at that. She had even taken a few turns down other streets while she was thinking too much. She became frustrated with herself for being so careless. She looked at her watch again. She was going to be late. With the frustration, the thoughts of her father, her siblings, her company, the hot chocolate, the fact that she was going to be late to such an important meeting all swirling in her head, Jan suddenly felt dizzy. She quickly found a bench and sat down. She put down her briefcase and her hot chocolate and held her head in her hands. But no matter how much she tried, she couldn't calm herself down. This was the first time she had ever felt overwhelmed. She had to do everything, but no matter how she broke it down, she couldn't see a way. And not to mention the fact that the longer she sat here thinking, the later she would be to her meeting. Her heart was beating much too fast, and she was finding it hard to breathe. What was she supposed to do? She then felt something cold tickle the back of her neck. She lifted her head in surprise, but no one was around her. She felt it again, but on her finger this time. She looked at it and saw it was snow. She looked up at the sky as snow slowly began to trickle down and quickly picked up from a few flakes to a steady dusting. Jan leaned back on the bench and just stared up at the clouds. She watched as the snow swished around the skyscrapers and reflected off the glass buildings. It was actually kind of pretty, Jan thought, and she wondered why she never noticed it before. She realized she would usually be indoors, or walking outside and being irritated by the snow for making it harder to walk. When was the last time she enjoyed the snow? She thought. Actually, she didn't think she ever liked the snow. She remembered when she and her siblings were little and how her brother and sister would jump up and down in excitement whenever it snowed, and would run outside and build snowmen and forts and throw snowballs at each other. But all Jan would think about was how they were going to shovel the snow from the driveway so their father would be able to drive in after work and they would be able to go to school the next day. Her brother and sister would tease her about being worrisome and adulty, but Jan would shrug off her siblings' comments and continue shoveling anyway. Her siblings didn't know how to look ahead. They were always so caught up with the moment and they never thought about the consequences in the future. One must look ahead and work their hardest to make the outcome right. That was what Jan always thought. But now, as she sat there on that bench, staring up at the sky, she began to question if maybe her way of thinking wasn't completely right. Maybe she should have been living more in the moment. After all, even if everything were to go wrong, even if everything were to collapse, even if she were to just disappear from the face of the earth would still spin. The days would go by, people would live, the snow would fall, life would go on. It always has, and it always will, for everyone, including herself. Everything she's done, everything she's gone through, she's got through it and it led her to where she is now. And no matter what will happen in the future, she will get through it as well, and life would continue to go on. So why was she so obsessed with worrying about making the future right? After all, what was the point in thinking of the future if you're never there to live it, Jan thought. What could she do now? She could either go to her meeting a few minutes late or get on a train and travel to her sister and father. Her meeting would only be today, and it's very important for the life of her company, and her sister would still be home later today. She was old enough to take care of herself for the day, and whether or not Jan visited her father now or later, unfortunately, it wouldn't change his situation. So she may as well focus on her meeting. As hard as it may be, she would forget about everything else for the moment and pay her full attention to getting her company's project pushed forward, and get it out of the way. Then she could go home and figure things out, together with her family. With her dizziness gone, Jan stood up and took a sip of her coffee that she forgot was actually hot chocolate. But this time, she didn't want to spit it out. She actually found that she liked it. It was sweet and comforting. She almost managed a little smile as she straightened up, dialed her sister's number, and began walking back. She didn't know if her decision would be the right one or the wrong one, but the important thing was that she kept moving forward, that she kept living her life. She didn't think she would ever be able to stop thinking so much about what will happen in the future. It was a part of who she was. But from now on, she promised herself she would deal with obstacles only once she's faced with them. And perhaps take a breath and look at the sky a little more often. Hello, it's Zaccura. How you doing? Yeah, right, okay, whatever. So now that you listened to all that, I figured I'd take a minute to talk about this project that I'm doing, as well as this drawing and story and so forth. So for 2018, I wanted to do a monthly project for YouTube, and of course, I'm apparently a huge procrastinator, and waited until January was almost over to even start. What do you mean apparently, Zaccura? Like you don't know. You don't know yourself. Anyway, I had a few ideas floating around my head since the end of December, but a couple weeks ago I came up with the idea to sort of like personify the months into characters. So like create a character that would represent each month. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds kind of cool. And then I was like, wait, how the heck are you gonna do that, Zaccura? But anyway, so I think that's part of the reason why I procrastinated, because I was like, oh yeah, I have no idea how I'm gonna do that, but I'll figure it out. Eventually, yeah, you know how that is, how that works. And then I procrastinated, and yeah. So for January, I came up with the concept that the character would be a businesswoman, and I'm not really sure why, but that was just the first idea that came to my head, and I never changed it because I just kept on. The more I did research, the more I actually felt that it started to fit more. I guess it's just that I feel like January is like all business. Like, you know, it's the first month of the year, it's a fresh start, we all have our New Year's resolutions or whatever, and we all like, oh, this is the year when I'm gonna work hard and be a real go-getter. And you know how that ends up going a little south as the year goes by. But anyway, when it comes to January, yeah, I always feel like it's kind of all business. Not to mention, there's usually a lot of stress with people because it's, you know, just after the holidays, and they're kind of like, all right, we gotta get back on track now and whatever. So yeah, I felt that it would fit. I don't know. And then what I did is I started doing research about the birthstones and the flowers, the colors, the zodiac signs, just anything I could find about each month, and to help me sort of characterize it, to make characters. And like, I even went on those sites, you know, that are like, oh, tell us when you're born and we'll tell you what kind of personality you have and whatever. And, you know, I don't necessarily believe in those kind of things, but hey, they're helpful for making characters. And I kept on seeing the same things, which were like loyalty, dependability, or things like you'll be good at business and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, all right. My first gut feeling was actually kind of legit. Anyway, at first, so I was totally stressing out about this thing because it was like 4 days before the end of January, and yeah, and then I was starting it, and I was gonna originally do it digitally, and it was going to be more of like a scene from the story, and I was starting to do the drawing digitally, and it was like on a Saturday, and I literally drew like the whole day, and it was so frustrating, and it just wasn't working, and I was so unhappy with how it was going. Not to mention, I was so stressed out because I was like, oh my gosh, I just wasted my whole day and I still don't have anything. Why did I procrastinate? Yeah, I was like panicking. Don't procrastinate, kids. Don't do it. So anyway, I was just like, you know, this isn't working, and I just need to restart. And I decided to just completely go the opposite. Just, you know, no, not digital. I'm going to do it traditionally, and I'm not going to make it a detailed scene that's kind of like realistic and whatever. I'm just going to make a design. And that's what I went with before this illustration, and to be honest, I'm pretty happy with it. So when it came to the composition of this illustration, and this is going to be sort of the same composition for each month, is the character in the front, and behind them has the birthstone, the flowers of the month, and the zodiac sign. So as you can see in the top left corner, there is the zodiac sign for Capricorn, and on the bottom right there is the zodiac sign for Aquarius, because those are the two zodiac signs for January. And in the back, the gemstone is supposed to be garnet, but I mean, even from the start I was like, this thing's gonna look like ruby, because I mean, when you see a red gemstone, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's supposed to be ruby. I mean, who's gonna be like, yeah, I'm sure that's garnet? No. If it's red, it's a gemstone, it's ruby. And I tested this theory, mwahahaha, on my friends, and they also thought it was ruby. So yeah, it looks like ruby, but what can you do? I mean, really the difference between garnet and ruby, and like garnet is just deeper red. Like ruby's really, really bright red, and garnet is really, really deep red. And that was actually a problem when it came to drawing this illustration, because I have no deep red pigments apparently. when it comes to my Winsor Newton inks, I don't have any red, I just have a pink. And when it came to my watercolors, I only have really light reds. And then for my Copic markers, which is these things that I ended up having to sort of fall back on, I did have like one deep red, but it wasn't deep enough. And I eventually started using like a dark gray to do the dark shadows, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna mess it up, and it ended up coming out alright. So but yeah, once July rolls around, I have a feeling they're gonna look exactly the same. So yeah, the flowers are carnations and snowdrops, and those are the two flowers of the month. And also the colors for the month were dark red, dark blue, and black. And those are like pretty depressing colors. I mean, no, it's not depressing, but just really serious, which fit the whole businesswoman thing even better, in my opinion. So yeah, it kind of ended up coming together pretty alright. But once again, like every story I've shared on YouTube, the story was really rushed. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. I don't know why. Why do I do this to myself? But anyway, this story was really rushed, like all my other stories I've shared. It was done in like one day, and as per usual, I'm not very happy with it. I'm like never happy with my stories. I don't know. It's like art, I guess. Like, I'm never totally happy with my art. I'm also like never happy with my stories. I'm getting a little better with the art thing. I'm starting to like my art a little bit more, but when it comes to my stories, I still don't like my stories very much. Anyway, I look forward to sharing the stories and the characters as the year goes by, and hopefully by the end of the year I will have 12 illustrations and 12 stories that I have shared with you guys. So if you enjoyed this video, found it entertaining in any way, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. I make new videos every week. Also, I'd love to hear comments. What do you think about this project? Are you looking forward to it? Are you not looking forward to it? How did you like the story? Oh, and also, how did you like the camera movement? Because I am kind of experimenting with my channel and, you know, just trying to make my videos more interesting. So I started setting up the camera a little differently and switching the views back and forth and stuff like that. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. Maybe I'll have a poll. How did you like the camera movement? You guys can go vote in there. If you want to follow me on social media, all the links are in the description box where you can follow me for daily updates. And until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!